الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. نعم.
قال المصنف رحمه الله: نقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله إن الله واحد لا شريك له ولا شيء مثله ولا شيء يعجزه ولا إله غيره، قديم بلا ابتداء دائم بلا انتهاء، لا يفنى ولا يبيد ولا يكون إلا ما يريد، لا تبلغه الأوهام ولا تدركه الأفهام ولا يشبه الأنام، حي لا يموت قيوم لا ينام، خالق بلا حاجة رازق بلا مؤنة، مميت بلا مخافة باعث بلا مشقة، ما زال بصفاته قديما قبل خلقه.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. When we finished the lesson last week, we finished with a couple of points that I made quite quickly, so I just want to repeat them so that there isn't any confusion over them. The first one is the statement of Imam At-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala when he said, لا يشبه الأنام. He said that Allah Azza wa Jal does not resemble Al-Anam. Al-Anam, they are the human beings, but Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't resemble any of His creation, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said that there are two words that the scholars use when they say that Allah doesn't resemble His creation. One of the words they use is they say that there is no tashbih, no resemblance. And the other word that they use is to say there is no tamthil, there is no comparison. And these two mean the same thing. So when the scholars say there is no tashbih, they mean that Allah does not resemble His creation. And when they say there is no tamthil, then they mean that Allah is not comparable to His creation. And both of these statements are completely correct. However, one of them is more precise than the other. And that is to say that to use the word tamthil, as the author said, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, earlier on in the text, is more precise than the word tashbih. And that is for a number of reasons, and I'm going to add one of them, which I hadn't discussed previously. The first one is that Allah Azza wa Jal, when He speaks about Himself in the Quran, what He negates in the Quran is at-tamthil. And He doesn't use the word tashbih. So He uses the word comparison and not the word resemblance. The second thing is that even though Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't resemble His creation in any way, subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a resemblance in the core meaning of the word. Knowledge and knowledge, seeing and seeing, hearing and hearing. There is no resemblance between Allah and His creation in any way. But there is something in the core meaning of the word. And the third thing is, and this is important, and that is that the people who accuse Ahlul Sunnah, the people who don't like Ahlul Sunnah, and they don't like the belief of Ahlul Sunnah, they accuse Ahlul Sunnah of tashbih when Ahlul Sunnah affirm the meaning of Allah's attributes. So let's talk about the attribute in three things relating to Allah's attributes. There's the actual attribute itself. Let's say Sami' Basir, whatever it might be, As-Sam' Al-Basar. There's the actual attribute or the name itself. And then there's a meaning of that name. And then there is how Allah Azza wa Jal does it. So there is a name or an attribute, and there is a ma'na, a meaning, and there is a kayfiyah. How does Allah do it? Ahlul Sunnah, they said, we affirm the name or the attribute, and we affirm the meaning that it means. We believe in the meaning. But we don't ask how Allah does it. This is what all of the early generations from the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the likes of the Imams, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, all of them unanimously agreed on this. That we believe in Allah's name, we believe in Allah's attribute, and we believe in the meaning. The groups that came later who followed the philosophers, they said, when you say that these meanings are true, you're doing tashbih. You're comparing Allah to His creation. When you say that Allah can hear, you're comparing Allah to His creation. When you say that Allah can see, you're comparing Allah to His creation. When you say that Allah has a hand, you're comparing Allah to His creation. That's what they said. Ahlul Sunnah said, how can we be comparing Allah to His creation when Allah Azza wa Jal said, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing like Him and He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. So another reason why the word tashbih is not so precise is that it's often used as an argument against you. People will say, you see, when you affirm the meaning of Allah's names, you're falling into tashbih. And instead you should just say these names have no meaning, or you should say the meaning is only known by Allah, or you should give it a meaning which is nothing to do with the meaning that it seems to be. And that obviously is not what Allah Azza wa Jal and what His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam called to. So there is nothing wrong with what Imam At-Tahawi said, وَلَا يُشْبِهُ الْأَنَامِ. However, just be aware that there are these little points to be aware when you're getting into the really nitty-gritty and the fine details, that the word at-tamthil is a little bit more precise in that regard. But the meaning is very clear. And we said that Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Hayy, Al-Qayyum, Hayyun la yamut, Qayyumun la yanam. Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum, as Allah Azza wa Jal said in Ayatul Kursi, Allahu la ilaha illahu, Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum. And we said that all of Allah's names that relate to Himself, all of them can be summarized by the name Al-Hayy. And all of the names of Allah that relate to what Allah does towards His creation, like creating them and sustaining them and causing them life and death and so on, all of these, and bestowing mercy on them, all of these come under or can be summarized by the name Al-Qayyum. And that is why some of the scholars, among them Al-Imam Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, they said Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum is the greatest name of Allah, because all of the names of Allah can be summarized within it. Others among the scholars said the greatest name of Allah is Allah, and others among the scholars, they said there is not one name but a group of names, among which are included Allah and Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum and some other names which have big comprehensive meanings. We also want to just make a little point here. When he said Hayyun la yamut, Al-Imam At-Tahawi here is giving us a number of benefits. One of the things he's telling us is that these names have real meanings, and that's why he said Hayyun la yamut. He is alive and He doesn't die. He gave you a real meaning, not that He's alive and we don't know what that means. He's alive, la yamut, He doesn't die. And the Prophet ﷺ used this statement. He said that Allah Azza wa Jal is Al-Hayy, or he said when he was calling upon Allah, you are Al-Hayy, the one who doesn't die. And the jinn and the ins, the jinn and the men, they die. And the other thing that we need to be clear about is whenever we say something negative about Allah, like Allah isn't like this, or Allah doesn't do this, we always affirm the opposite, the perfect opposite. So for example, if you say Allah is never unjust, Allah never oppresses anyone, وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ, your Lord does not oppress any of His servants. You have to, along with that, believe that Allah is perfectly just. You can't only speak about Allah in the negative, because ultimately if you only ever spoke about Allah in the negative, that would be atheism. Because if you end up saying, I believe in a God who doesn't do this and doesn't do this and isn't like this and isn't like this and isn't like this, you're not describing anything until you affirm the opposite. So yes, Allah is not unjust. That means that Allah is perfectly just. The most just is not a name of Allah, But if someone asked you, what's the proof that Allah is just? Give me a proof that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. Any of the ayat which say that Allah does not do injustice are a proof that Allah is just. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. Your Lord does not oppress any of His servants. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. And your Lord does not oppress anyone. All of these are proofs that Allah is infinitely just. Because whenever you say something negative about Allah, Allah isn't or Allah doesn't, you're automatically believing and approving of the opposite for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The perfect opposite. He went on to say, rahimahullah ta'ala, خَالِقٌ بِلَا حَاجَةٍ رَازِقٌ بِلَا مُؤْنَةٍ. He said, خَالِقٌ بِلَا حَاجَةٍ. He is the creator without need. And here what Imam At-Tahawi is giving you is a beautiful principle. And that is, we always affirm the most perfect meaning for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whenever we speak about Allah, we always affirm the most perfect meaning. So in terms of creation, creation can actually mean two things. One of them is only for Allah Azza wa Jal, and that is bringing things into being from nothing. And there is another meaning of creation which is to manufacture or to make something up. And this is something that Allah Azza wa Jal does, and likewise other things from Allah's creation can do it. And that is from where Allah Azza wa Jal said that He is Ahsanul Khaliqeen. Ahsanul Khaliqeen. Ahsanul Khaliqeen doesn't mean the best of creators, because Allah is the only creator. If the meaning is the best of creators, then that's affirming that there are lots of creators and Allah is the best one. Allah is not the best of creators. Ahsanul Khaliqeen, that's not the meaning. Allah is the only creator. He is Al-Khaliq. And nobody else created anything besides Him. But here, Al-Khalq, it means either At-Taqdeer, the one who decrees and the one who establishes, or it means to, like a word similar to invent or to manufacture or something like that. That's perhaps the meaning of Al-Khaliq when Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about it in the plural, that there are lots of people who are Khaliq, but Allah is the best of them. And as for creation, which is bringing something into being from nothing, then only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this. I think the closest thing you can say is that when Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about Al-Khaliqun, the lots of creators, then the meaning here is the process of deciding something or making a plan for something and carrying it out. That is perhaps the meaning of the best meaning that you can give here. But as for the meaning of creation, Khaliq to mean creator, this is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to create from nothing. And when Allah Azza wa Jal created from nothing, He didn't do so because He needed His creation. And this is something that will benefit you a lot when you explain Islam to other people, because people get very confused about this and they say, well, why does Allah need me to worship Him? You hear a lot of non-Muslims say that. Why does God need me to worship Him? And the answer is, Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't need you to worship Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need you to worship Him. Allah didn't create you because He needed you. He didn't create the arsh because He needed it. He didn't create the angels that hold up the arsh because He needed those angels to hold up the arsh. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't need the angels to hold the arsh, and He doesn't need the heavens and the earth, and He doesn't need His creation. He didn't need His prophets and messengers alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't need anything from His creation, but He created it for a perfect wisdom that is with Him, and in order to show and to be, for His names and attributes to be known. And that is why Allah Azza wa Jal said, Allahu alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawat wa min al-ardi mithlahun يتنزل الأمر بينهن لتعلموا أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. Allah, the one who created the seven heavens and from the earth the like of them, His command descends between them so that you may know. Allah created the heavens and the earth so that you may know that Allah is able to do all things. Let me ask you a question. Was Allah able to do all things before He created the heavens and the earth? Of course, Allah was able to do all things before He created. So why did He create the heavens and the earth? For you to know it, for you to know Him, for you to know His names and His attributes, and for you to worship Him based on those names and attributes. And that's how we join between this ayah and between the ayah in Surah Al-Dhariyat, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We only created the jinn and the men to worship me alone, i.e., Allah Azza wa Jal created the heavens and the earth not because He needed them, but because He wanted His creation to know Him. And when you know Him, what must you do? You must worship Him. Because once you know Allah and you know that only Allah creates and only Allah provides and only Allah sustains and only Allah gives life and only Allah causes death, how can you then worship something besides Allah? How could you worship a statue when you know that statue doesn't create, doesn't sustain, doesn't provide, doesn't give life, doesn't cause death? That statue can't even help itself. If you came and pushed it over, it couldn't even stand itself back up again. So how could you worship something that didn't create and didn't sustain and didn't nurture and didn't provide and didn't cause life and didn't cause death? So Allah Azza wa Jal created the heavens and the earth not because He needed you or He needed it, but He created it so that His creation can bear witness to His majesty and His supremacy and His greatness and all of His other names and attributes. And Allah Azza wa Jal, not only does He not need His creation, but He provides for every single one among His creation. رَازِقٌ بِلَا مُؤْنَةٍ. Allah Azza wa Jal provides. He is Ar-Razzaq. From the names of Allah Azza wa Jal is that He is Ar-Razzaq, and that indicates that Allah Azza wa Jal is frequently providing. Because the word Razzaq is different from Raziq. Raziq is a provider. Razzaq is one who is always providing and provides in abundance. He provides so much that you can't count His provision. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only did He create us when He doesn't need us. And so if someone asks you, why do you worship Allah? Does He need you? Say, He doesn't need me to worship Him, but He deserves for me to worship Him. That's the answer. He doesn't need me to worship Him. He deserves it. So why does He deserve it? Because He created me. He provided for me. He guided me, both in a physical sense to be able to eat and drink and live and breathe, and in a spiritual sense to know about His religion and to know about Him. Because He nurtured me, because He did He gave me every blessing, so many that I can't count. So Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't need me, but He deserves for me to worship Him. It's right for me to worship Him. It's what's right. Because if somebody gave you something, should you not show gratitude to the person who gave you? Like for example, if somebody just came on the street and just gave you £500, just said, there you go, take £500. You would at least say something, at least, thank you. How about the one who gave you your life, the one who guided you, the one who gave you your iman, the one who gave you every single good, the one who protected you from every evil? There's no comparison. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves to be worshipped, but He doesn't need you to worship Him. If all of His creation disbelieved in Him, it wouldn't take anything away from His greatness. And if all of His creation believed in Him, it wouldn't increase His greatness in anything, because it's already absolutely perfect in every single way. Raziqun bila mu'na. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider without any difficulty. The explainer, the Shaykh Ibn Abi al-Izz al-Hanafi, he said, explaining this, he said, أي بلا ثقل ولا كلفة. There's no difficulty, no hardship in Allah's provision. And this is indicated by the hadith, in which the hadith of Abi Dharr radiallahu anhu, in which Allah Azza wa Jal said, the Prophet ﷺ narrates from Allah. We call this a hadith Qudusi. Some people say Qudsi, but it's not really, grammatically, it's not really very correct. We should say Qudusi with a dhamma on the dal. Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, Ya ibadi, O my servants, لو أن أولكم وآخركم وإنسكم وجنكم. If the first of you and the last of you and the men of you and the jinn of you قاموا في صعيد واحد, stood on a single plane, فسألوني, and they asked me, فأعطيت كل إنسان مسألته, and I gave every single person what they asked for. ما نقص ذلك مما عندي إلا كما ينقص المخيط إذا أدخل البحر. This would only decrease the likes of, it wouldn't decrease anything, like the needle which is dipped into the sea. If you dip a needle, a pin, into the sea and you take it out, did the sea decrease any water? The sea didn't decrease in anything. There's more came into the sea by the time you dipped the needle into the sea and took it out. If Allah Azza wa Jal gave every single human being everything on their wish list, and trust me, the wish list is very long. If you get everything you ever wanted, and every jinni, from the first human being and the first jinni until the last human being and the last jinni, they stood at the same time on a single plane. And every one of them asked Allah until there was nothing left that they could ask for. That wouldn't decrease the dominion of Allah, just like the needle when it's dipped into the sea. It doesn't decrease the volume of the water in the sea at all. And then He said, مُمِيتٌ بِلَا مَخَافَةٍ بَاعِثٌ بِلَا مَشَقَّةٍ. Allah causes His creation to die without any fear. And that Allah Azza wa Jal does whatever He wants. He doesn't have any, there are no consequences or reprisals to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees and what Allah decides. If Allah decrees for a person to die, there is no mu'aqib, there is no one who's going to come after that and say, why did you cause this person to die at this time? Why did this happen like this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asked about what He does, but we will be asked about what we do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes any of His creation to die whenever He wills. And every single one of His creation will taste death. كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Everything on the earth will perish. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. And the face of your Lord, full of majesty and honor, is what will remain. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ba'ith. Allah will resurrect His creation bila mashaqqa, without any difficulty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in many places in the Quran about the resurrection, because the resurrection is something that many of the people of Quraysh used to deny in one degree or another. They used to have issues with the resurrection. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us many proofs for the fact that it's easy for Him to resurrect His creation. And from this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to look at the dead earth. How Allah Azza wa Jal brings life to the earth that is dead. So you see a field, or you see a garden. All the plants in the garden are dead. Completely dead. It's completely barren. By the time of the winter comes and it's totally, everything is dead. You can't see a single thing left alive. The spring comes and it comes back to life again. The one who caused it to come back to life again is the same one who will bring you back to life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the stories of some human beings who died and were brought back to life from the things that Quraysh used to know about from the past. For example, like the people of the cave, and like that man that is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to die for 100 years and then brought him back to life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us many reasons to believe in the resurrection. Even just the things you see outside and the way you see the world, and you see things coming back to life after they've died, is a sign that Allah Azza wa Jal will resurrect you. And then more than that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us which is more difficult, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create you the first time from nothing, or for Allah Azza wa Jal to resurrect you after you have already come into existence. There is no doubt that for Allah to resurrect you after you've already come into existence is something easier than creating you in the first place. And nothing is difficult for Allah Azza wa Jal. And the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this argument is because if Quraysh believed that Allah created them, that Allah Azza wa Jal created them from nothing, and they used to believe that Allah created them from nothing. If you believe Allah created you from nothing, how can you then say, مَن يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ, who's going to bring the bones to life after they have turned to dust? Because at the end of the day, if Allah Azza wa Jal created you from nothing, then it's very easy to believe that Allah Azza wa Jal is able to resurrect you. But there is no mashaqqa, there is no difficulty in that. When Allah Azza wa Jal causes the entire of creation from the men and the jinn to come back to life in a single time with the blowing of the horn, ثُمَّ نُفِخَ فِيهِ أُخْرَى فَإِذَا هُمْ قِيَامٌ يَنْظُرُونَ, then it will be blown in the horn one more time and every one of them will be standing up looking around. That's not difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no difficulty in any of that. And then Imam At-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, مَا زَالَ بِصِفَاتِهِ قَدِيمًا قَبْلَ خَلْقِهِ. Allah has not ceased to have these attributes before He created His creation. And this is really important. And actually, if you understand this, a lot of the confusion around Allah's names and attributes will disappear. And that is that Allah has always had His names and attributes. His names and attributes didn't come into existence when He created you or when He created creation. So when Allah created creation, He didn't become the creator. Allah was always the creator. Allah was Al-Khaliq before He created anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was Ar-Razzaq before He created creation. He was the provider. But when He created creation, His creation came to know of Him through these actions and these names and attributes. But Allah Azza wa Jal always had them. So these names and these attributes and these actions, they weren't something that came about new when Allah Azza wa Jal created His creation. And Imam At-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala spends quite a significant part of his poem discussing this. So inshallah we'll hear the next part. But it's all based around this idea that Allah Azza wa Jal's names and attributes didn't come into existence when He created creation. He always had them. And that's why, and I'll just mention an example, people who struggle to understand that Allah Azza wa Jal speaks, they say, if you say that Allah speaks, you're saying that Allah did something when He didn't do it before. That's their problem. They can't get their head around this idea that Allah does what He wants when He wants. We say Allah has always been able to speak, and speaking has always been an attribute of Allah. There was never a time when Allah did not have the attribute of being able to speak. But He speaks to whoever He wants, whenever He wants. فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد. He does whatever He wants, whenever He wants. Nobody has a timetable where they say to Allah that you have to follow this and you have to do this at this time. Allah does what He wants when He wants. But Allah has always had those names and Allah has always had those attributes. There's never been a time when those names and attributes didn't belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
قال المصنف رحمه الله لم يزدد بكونهم شيئا لم يكن قبلهم من صفته وكما كان بصفاته أزليا كذلك لا يزال عليها أبديا.
He said لم يزدد بكونهم شيئا لم يكن قبلهم من صفته. Allah Azza wa Jal didn't increase any attributes. He didn't gain any attributes or get an increase in the number of attributes that He had after He created His creation and brought them into existence. And that's very clear Because everything about Allah is perfect. In fact, the word Al-Husna in Al-Asma Al-Husna, the names of Allah which are Al-Husna, the word Al-Husna, it indicates perfection. That everything about Allah is the pinnacle of perfection, the height of perfection. There is no more perfection. It's absolutely perfect in every single way. All of Allah's names and attributes. If we said that when creation came about, Allah gained an attribute, that must have meant that there was a deficiency before that. There was something missing, and then Allah Azza wa Jal gained it. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always had those names and always had those attributes. Nothing came about new. But Allah does His actions whenever He wants, in whatever way that He wants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is part of perfection. Because it's not perfection if you can't act when you want, in whatever way that you want. That's not perfection. If you said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't able to choose when He wants to speak, Allah isn't able to choose when He wants to give mercy, that's not perfection. Perfection is that Allah Azza wa Jalla has always had those names and always had those attributes, but that He chooses to carry out actions whenever He wills and however He wills, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then He said, وَكَمَا كَانَ بِصِفَاتِهِ أَزَلِيَّ كَذَلِكَ لَا يَزَالُ عَلَيْهَا أَبَدِيَّ. Just like Allah Azza wa Jal has always had those attributes, likewise He will always have them. There is never going to be a time when those attributes cease to apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are azaliyya and abadiyya. They have always been. They never had a beginning. And they are abadiyya. They will always be and they have no end. And that is like what the author said at the beginning, قَدِيمٌ بِلَا ابْتِدَاءٍ آخِرٌ بِلَا انْتِهَاءٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the first and there is nothing that came before Him and there was never any beginning, and He is the one that will remain forever and nothing from Him will cease or end. So there is no beginning and there is no end. And that's not only true for Allah in Himself, but it's true for His name and attributes. And that actually helps you to understand. There's a principle that some of the scholars mentioned, that they said, Al-kalamu fi sifat kal-kalami fi dhat. Whatever you say about Allah's attributes is the same thing you say about Allah Himself. If you say Allah Himself has no beginning and no end, then you must also say about His attributes that they have no beginning and no end. Whatever you say about Allah's attributes, it's the same thing like you would say about Allah Himself. So if you say Allah Himself has no beginning and no end, then you also have to say that His attributes have no beginning and no end. Now,
قال المصنف رحمه الله: ليس بعد خلق الخلق استفاد اسم الخالق، ولا بإحداث البرية استفاد اسم الباري.
نعم.
له معنى الربوبية ولا مربوب، ومعنى الخالق ولا مخلوق. وكما أنه محيي الموتى بعدما أحيا استحق هذا الاسم قبل إحيائهم، كذلك استحق اسم الخالق قبل إنشائهم.
That's enough, inshallah. He said, رحمه الله تعالى: ليس بعد خلق الخلق استفاد اسم الخالق ولا بإحداث البرية استفاد اسم الباري. So here, Imam At-Tahawi is giving you an example so you can understand what he had said previously. He said, after creating creation, He didn't gain the name Al-Khaliq. The name Al-Khaliq didn't come to Allah after He created creation. That name Al-Khaliq is Azaliyya Abadiyya. It has always been and it will always be. When Allah Azza wa Jal created creation, He didn't become the creator. He was always the creator. But He chose to create them at a time that He chose, subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the way that He chose. And likewise, His name Al-Bari, they have different translations for this. I've seen it translated as the inventor. The one who brings Al-Bari is part of Al-Khalq or Al-Khaliq. Al-Khaliq is like a generic name for Allah's creation. It covers all of the stages of creation. But Allah Azza wa Jal said, Huwa al-Khaliqul Bari'ul Musawwir. Some of the scholars, they said that when Allah said Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir together, these are three stages of creation. The first one is the decree to create. And this is when he said Al-Khaliq. Because we said one of the meanings of Al-Khalq is At-Taqdir. To will something or to decree how something, to decide how something is going to be. And this is the meaning which is shared with, the core meaning which is shared with creation, when Allah Azza wa Jal said, Ahsanul Khaliqeen, that Allah is the best of those who create, i.e. the best of those who decree and decide. So they said that Al-Khalq, it is the decree. And then when Allah said Al-Bari, this is bringing what Allah decreed into existence. And when Allah said Al-Musawwir, this is giving it its form and its shape and its proper proportions. And so in this way, Al-Khaliq is a comprehensive term for all of Allah's, the creating that Allah does, that Allah is the creator. But when you take it in three stages, Al-Khalq in the beginning is At-Taqdir, and Al-Bar, or that from Allah's name Al-Bari, is to bring it into existence from nothing, and At-Taswir from the name Al-Musawwir is to give it a shape and a form. And those are the three stages of creation. And you can summarize them by saying Al-Khaliq. So when Allah Azza wa Jal brought creation into being from nothing, He didn't gain the name Al-Bari. He had that name before. The one who creates from nothing. He had that name before. He didn't gain it after creation came into being. The author, he said, Rahimahullah ta'ala, له معنى الربوبية ولا مربوب ومعنى الخالق ولا مخلوق. Again, he's emphasizing the issue of meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the meaning of ar-rububiyyah, not the meaning of being owned by something. So when Allah Azza wa Jal says that He is ar-Rabb subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He is ar-Rabb, He is the Lord, we affirm that Allah has rububiyyah, lordship. That means the meaning of the word Rabb. It's not an empty word. It's not like an empty box with nothing inside. This is what the Jahmiyyah said. They said these names are like empty boxes. When you look inside, there's nothing there. It's just a word. But we say no, the word ar-Rabb, it means something. It means that Allah is dhur rububiyyah, the one who has the attribute of lordship. And lordship comes back to creating, providing and controlling. Usually many of the scholars, they said that lordship comes back to being creating and providing and controlling and mastery, being supreme over your creation. This is from the meanings of the word Rabb, and also nurturing as well. So Allah Azza wa Jal, when we say that He is ar-Rabb, we affirm that this word ar-Rabb, it has a meaning, and that meaning is dhur rububiyyah, the one who has the attribute of lordship, all the attributes of lordship, the creator, the sustainer, the provider, the one who gives life and causes death, the one who decrees, as-Sayyid, the one who is the master over all of His creation. Wala marbub. But the meanings that relate to creation, like as in having a Rabb above you, that doesn't apply to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah Azza wa Jal, He isn't owned by anyone or controlled by anyone. He doesn't have a master above Him, or He doesn't have a creator or a sustainer or a provider. Allah is the creator and the sustainer and the provider. And likewise, وَمَعْنَى الْخَالِقِ وَلَا مَخْلُوقِ. So when somebody says, the name Al-Khaliq, when you open the box and look inside, does it have a meaning? We say, yes, it has a meaning. The meaning of Al-Khaliq is that Allah Azza wa Jal creates. But Allah is not created. Allah and His names and His attributes are not created. They were not created. So Allah creates, but He's not created. Allah is the Lord, but He has no Lord above Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is important because when you take these names, you have to affirm the true and perfect and proper meanings, but you also have to negate the meanings that are false. So for example, if someone said, I believe Allah created creation, but I believe that Allah was created by something else, we say, no, you can't be a Muslim like this. You can't be a Muslim like this. You have to affirm that Allah is the creator and nobody created Him. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He didn't have any children and He was not born of anyone. Nobody created Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah Azza wa Jal created creation. And this also has an important point when it comes to some of the arguments of the mutakallimin, the people who are influenced by philosophy, when they fell into an error of trying to explain things logically and in processes that everything that exists has to have a creator. And everything that, and they started going in steps. But the problem is, okay, who created Allah? Allah Azza wa Jal wasn't created by anything. And that's why Imam At-Tahawi, he completely draws a line under this. He says all the meanings of being a Lord apply to Allah, but none of the meanings of being a slave or being under a Lord, none of those apply to Allah. All the meanings of being a creator apply to Allah, but none of the meanings of being created apply to Allah. So Allah is not created, not in Himself, not in His names, not in His attributes, and not in His actions, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وكما أنه محيي الموتى بعدما أحيا استحق هذا الاسم قبل إحيائهم كذلك استحق اسم الخالق قبل إنشائهم. And as Allah is محيي الموتى, the one who will bring the dead to life, after He had brought them to life. So Allah Azza wa Jal brought them to life, and then He will cause them to die and then bring them to life again. He deserved this name before He will bring them to life again. So before Allah Azza wa Jal will bring His creation to life, He still is deserving and fitting of this name, Muhyi al-Mawta. Is this name a name of Allah Azza wa Jal, or is it an attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This comes under a mas'ala or an issue which is known as the al-Asma al-Murakkabah, the names which are made up of two parts, like Rabbul Alameen and Ahsanul Khaliqeen and Khairul Ghafirin and Arhamul Rahimin. Are these names of Allah Azza wa Jal, or are they attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is something the scholars differed over, but they are at least attributes, if not names. They are at least attributes. And some of the scholars confirm these compound names. We call them compound names, names that are made up of two words, like Rabbul Alameen and Ahsanul Khaliqeen. Some of the scholars affirm them as names and others affirm them as attributes, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. But in any case, Allah Azza wa Jal was deserving of being described as Muhyi al-Mawta, the one who brings the dead to life, before He brought the dead to life, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And likewise, before He brought creation into being, He was deserving of the name Al-Khaliq. Now.
قال المصنف رحمه الله ذلك بأنه على كل شيء قدير وكل شيء إليه فقير وكل أمر عليه يسير لا يحتاج إلى شيء ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير.
Well, it's very beautiful what the author, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala. He described Allah Azza wa Jal very, very, very beautiful the way he put it. He said, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٍ. This is because Allah is able to do everything. Meaning that before Allah created creation, He was able to create them. It wasn't a lack of ability. It was simply that Allah Azza wa Jal created what He created when He willed. It wasn't so. Allah Azza wa Jal was always able to do all of those things. He's able to do everything. وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ إِلَيْهِ فَقِيرٌ. And everything is in need of Allah Azza wa Jal. أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. You are the people who are in desperate need of Allah. And Allah is Al-Ghani, the one who doesn't need anybody, the most rich, the one who doesn't need anyone. Al-Hamid, the one who is worthy of all praise. Everything is in need of Allah. And that is from the meanings of the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, As-Samad. From the meanings of the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, As-Samad, is the one who everyone is in need of him and he is in need of nobody. He doesn't need anyone, but everyone is in need of him. The Arsh is in need of him. The Kursi is in need of him. The Hamalatul Arsh, the angels that carry the throne, are in need of him. Jibreel is in need of him. The prophets and the messengers were in need of him, alayhimus salatu salam. Every angel in the heavens and the earth is in need of him. Every single human being is in need of him. Every jinni is in need of him. Every animal, every atom that moves in the heavens or the earth is in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah needs nothing and no one. وَكُلُّ أَمْرٍ عَلَيْهِ يَسِيرٌ. And everything is easy for Allah Azza wa Jal. Everything is easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the strangest of things, when you hear, for example, when Zakaria asked for a child, and when Maryam was told that she would have a child without a father, and they said, أَنَّا يَكُونَ, how will it be? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, هُوَ عَلَيَّ هَيِّنٌ. It's easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not difficult for Allah Azza wa Jal. Everything is easy. وَمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِعَزِيزٍ. Nothing is hard for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is easy for Allah Azza wa Jal. لَا يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى شَيْءٍ. Allah needs nothing. Allah needs nothing. Allah doesn't need a creation to worship Him. Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't need a creation so that He can have the name Al-Khaliq. And if He doesn't need His creation to have the name Al-Khaliq, then He doesn't need a creation to worship Him in the first place. But Allah Azza wa Jal created them so that they could know His majesty and His greatness. And then He quoted the ayah, which is the most important asl and fundamental principle as it relates to understanding Allah's names and attributes. And if you understand this ayah, you understand all of the principles of Allah's names and attributes. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. There is nothing which is comparable to Him, and He is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. Now we said, and we've mentioned in other books, that the belief of Ahl Sunnah, you guys will let me know when it's adhan time, won't you? It's time now. Okay, give the adhan, then we'll quickly finish off this last explanation of the ayah, and then we finish for today, inshallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا
Inshallah ta'ala, we won't keep you too long, but we just want to finish with this ayah, then we can start the next topic next week. Next week we're going to start from 8:30 inshallah, because Maghrib is at 9:23 I think by the time we get round to next Thursday inshallah. So in order for us to have our 45 minutes, we're going to start at 8:30 bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We said that the principle with Allah's names and attributes, if someone asked you to summarize our belief about Allah's names and attributes, we would say, أن نصف الله بما وصف به نفسه أو بما وصف به رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم من غير تحريف ولا تعطيل ولا تكييف ولا تمثيل. That we describe Allah with what He described Himself with and what His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam described Him with, without changing the meaning and without denying it and without comparing Allah to His creation and without asking how. That's the basic belief. That entire belief can be taken from this ayah. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. First of all, that we describe Allah with what He described Himself with. So what do we see that Allah described Himself with? Allah described Himself as being Sami'un Basir. That Allah hears everything and Allah Azza wa Jal sees everything. Therefore, we describe Allah the way He described Himself. We don't describe Him with something different. We describe Him the way that He described Himself and the way that His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam described Him. We don't change the meaning away from that and take it somewhere else, because Allah said Sami'un Basir, and no one is more eloquent in speech than Allah Azza wa Jal. وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا. Who is more truthful than Allah in speech? Allah Azza wa Jal is the most truthful in speech. And Allah described Himself as being As-Sami' al-Basir. So we describe Him with what He described Himself with, and we don't deny it. And we don't change the meaning. And we don't ask how, because Allah said, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing comparable to Him. There is nothing comparable to Him. And we don't compare Allah to His creation. So all of these principles can be found within this ayah. Then, if you look at the ayah, and this is the last point I wanted to make, Allah Azza wa Jal used two names in this ayah, both of which contain attributes that exist for things within His creation. In other words, Allah's creation can see, among Allah's creation are things that can see and things that can hear. Why did Allah Azza wa Jal choose those two names when He said nothing is comparable to Him? In order to get this principle in your mind, that Allah sees and Allah hears, but His sight is not like the sight of His creation, and the hearing is not like the hearing of His creation. And the same thing you say about Sami'un Basir, you say about the wajh of Allah, the face of Allah, the yad, the hand of Allah, the foot of Allah, and everything else that Allah said about Himself and His Prophet ﷺ said about Him. It is not like His creation. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And this is the most important principle, or the fundamental principle in the names and attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. And inshallah we'll continue with Al-Aqeedah At-Tahawiyyah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala next week from 8:30. We're just going a little bit forward to catch the time of Maghrib. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.